What goes on in the operating room when a patient is under anesthesia that might surprise most people? This guy Felipe came in for knee surgery after a pretty bad biking accident. Mid-30s, quiet type, seemed a little nervous, but honestly nothing unusual. Just your typical patient who wanted to get his leg fixed and get back to normal life. Dr. Martinez started the anesthesia process like always. Felipe mumbled something as he was going under, but none of us could understand it. We all just figured it was normal grogginess, you know? People say weird stuff when they're falling asleep from the drugs. But 10 minutes into the actual surgery, something bizarre happened. Felipe started talking, not mumbling or making random sounds, actually speaking fluently in what sounded like a completely different language. At first, the surgeon just ignored it. Sometimes patients talk under anesthesia, usually gibberish or random English words. But this wasn't English. It wasn't Spanish either, which would make sense since Felipe's last name was Hispanic. It sounded like nothing I'd ever heard before. Really specific pronunciation, almost musical in a way. The whole surgical team just kept working, but we were all exchanging looks like, what the hell is happening right now? Then I froze completely. My hands literally stopped moving mid-task because I recognized what he was saying. Not the words exactly, but the language itself. It was this super obscure dialect from Guatemala that only like 3,000 people in the entire world actually speak. I knew it because my grandmother used to speak it to me when I was little, before she died when I was 12. I hadn't heard that dialect in over 15 years, but Felipe was speaking it perfectly. And he wasn't just talking random nonsense. He was telling a complete story about his childhood. In perfect dialect, he described growing up in this tiny mountain village. He talked about his brother who disappeared one day after men in military uniforms came to their town. He recited exact names, specific dates, even described the layout of streets in his old village. I was writing down everything I could while still doing my job because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Some of the names he mentioned sounded familiar, including my uncle Roberto, who also vanished during that same time period in the exact same region Felipe was describing. The surgery took about 2 hours total. Felipe kept talking the entire time, sharing details about his life that seemed way too specific and personal to be made up by an unconscious brain. When we finished and Felipe was waking up in recovery, I asked Dr. Martinez if I could speak with him privately. The doctor shrugged and said sure, he didn't care. About an hour later, Felipe was fully awake and alert. I approached him carefully because this was going to sound absolutely insane. "Do you remember saying anything during your surgery today?" I asked him. He blinked in confusion and looked at me like I was crazy. "What? No. Why would I remember that? I was completely out." So I told him everything I heard, how he spoke in this rare Guatemalan dialect, how he described his village, his missing brother, even mentioned my uncle's name. Felipe's face went completely white. Then he started crying right there in the hospital bed. He told me he buried that part of his life 30 years ago when he moved to the United States. He never told anyone about his past, not even his wife of 20 years. He thought no one here would ever understand. He thought that language and those memories were dead and gone forever. Turns out Felipe and I grew up less than 5 miles apart in Guatemala. Our families knew each other before the Civil War forced everyone to scatter across different countries. I ended up helping him reconnect with surviving relatives who had also made it to the US. I even had information about other families from our village that he thought were all dead.